Ladies and gentlemen, this is Hollywood Joe from Hollywood's World of Sports, coming to you today with another edition of Hollywood's Hot Topics. And I want to talk to you about a story that broke very recently, and it is the story of the NFL suspending Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley for betting on NFL games. Ridley is suspended for the entire 2022 NFL season and cannot reapply for reinstatement until, I believe, February 2023. Now, I get that there are things in the athletes' contracts about gambling and sports betting, and I understand that he made wagers on some NFL games. Now, I've heard different reports on what the amounts were. It wasn't millions. It was in the thousands. So, I mean, it's not like, $1,000 to someone like Ridley probably isn't that much. But here's the thing. When Calvin was making these bets, he was not an active member of the NFL roster, or the Atlanta Falcons roster, I should say. And he was taking time off due to mental health issues. And here's the thing, mental health can have all sorts of, different things to it. I mean, mental health problems can, cause addiction, and, you know, somebody might need some sort of like adrenaline rush or something to help take their mind off their mental health issues. And I'm not saying that Calvin Ridley betting on NFL games was a great idea, but here's the thing I don't understand. There's no way Calvin Ridley could have thrown a game. It's not like he's going to call up his buddies at the Falcons and say, hey, miss a catch or miss a tackle. Athletes, in my opinion, they're not wired that way. Athletes want to play the absolute best they can, so they win. It's as simple as that. And so I understand, like, there's rules in the NFL handbook, and I'm sure there's rules in the NHL and Major League Baseball and the NBA handbook. But here's my thing. You have things like Draftkings and Caesar Sports, Caesar Sportsbook, all these sportsbook apps now that allow you to bet on just about every other sporting event out there. Sports betting, sports gambling, whatever you want to call it, it's become a very wealthy and lucrative industry. Many sports fans love the fact that they can bet on games legally now, at least in most states, anyways. And so here's the thing. Do I think athletes should be allowed to bet on sports? Now, my answer is going to surprise you. I think yes, but with, some exceptions. Now, if I am playing in the NFL, like Calvin is, and he plays for the Atlanta Falcons, one of the rules should be that you cannot bet on any games that the team that you play for is involved with. So that means you cannot bet on your team. And I think that's fair. And I think that's where Pete Rose got into a lot of trouble when he was gambling, is that he was betting on the Cincinnati Reds. Now, there was no evidence that he ever threw a game. He just had confidence in his team. And it sounds like that's what Ridley was doing as well. It sounds like he was betting on the Falcons to win because he had confidence in the team that he's on. And you know what? Hey, I think having confidence in your team is a great thing, but I don't think you should be putting money on it. But so, like I said, an NFL player wants to go bet on an NBA game, NHL game, Major League Baseball game, NASCAR, boxing, UFC, whatever. I think they should be allowed to. I think the only exception for any athlete is that they're not allowed to bet on the team that they're playing for or involved with. That to me should be the only rule. Now, if you start getting in situations where an athlete bets on his team, whether it be a win or loss, and then, there's evidence that they're throwing games or not performing up to their fullest potential, that's a different story. That's a problem. Uh, there was problems like that in the NBA with, a referee quite a few years ago that he was involved with a very, very in-depth gambling problem, and he was an NBA referee, and we all know he got into a lot of trouble. So things like that, if you're in a position where you influence the outcome of a game, you should not be allowed to bet. Like I don't believe referees, officials should be allowed to bet because I think personally, I think referees, umpires, officials can manipulate the outcome of a game more than an athlete could, in my opinion. Because, if you see an athlete, like, for example, Ridley, we'll go back to Ridley because he's the reason we're talking about this. Say Ridley drops, a lot of really obvious good passes that should be catches. You're going to notice that. You really are going to notice that. But for example, official starts calling penalties or, an umpire starts calling balls and strikes that aren't really balls and strikes, that can be a little more manipulated in my opinion. Whereas if, like, for example, you see a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes throw like 4 or 5 interceptions in the game. That to me is like an obvious sign that something's not right. So to me, athletes can bet on sports as long as it's not the team that they play with or involved with. Referees and officials and umpires should not be allowed to bet on sports because, again, they can manipulate the outcome of a game more so than the athletes, like I said. So this whole thing with Ridley, I'm shocked that he got a year because I've seen NFL players get suspended for a lot less for doing a lot worse, in my opinion. And so I really think, baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, I think they need to ease up on the whole, gambling thing. I'm not saying it's right. I mean, there's a lot of traditionalists out there who think it's immoral and wrong and whatever. That's their, opinion and decision to believe that way. But like I said, it's become such a lucrative and wealthy industry. Like, to me, if I'm watching UFC fight or whatever, I would love to hear who, like, baseball players, basketball players, football players, hockey players. I would love to see who they're betting on. Honestly, I would love it. Same thing with, anything else. Like, just intertwine the sports. I would love to know, like, what other athletes are thinking when it comes to who they're betting on and why they're betting on them. That's just my opinion. I find it fascinating. But, you know what? There's just certain lines you can't cross. And unfortunately, right now, Calvin Ridley crossed one of them, and he's paying the price for it. Do I think it was a harsh punishment for someone that wasn't actively playing? I think it was a little harsh. Just my opinion. But I could go on about this all day long because it fascinates me. It's an intriguing topic, and I'm sure we haven't heard the last about this. And I'm sure Calvin Ridley won't be the last professional athlete to gamble on sporting events. So, with that being said, my name is Hollywood Joe from Hollywood's World of Sports, reminding you as always, controversy doesn't come without criticism.